welcome back. Did you miss us? We weren't gone for very long, but we are back with the second ever TCC Book Club, and we are joined by a very sleepy Anna who was unfortunately too tired to commit to the full recording, but we managed to talk her into doing the book club.
I've been out for 14 hours today. Forgive me.
It's fine. It's fine.
Whereas I have not been out for 14 hours in like the past 2 months combined.
Nice. That's the kind of life I want to lead, to be honest.
You're not going to be able to lead that life forever. Don't worry, I'll make her get out more.
Yeah, Zariel forcing you to go outside.
Please.
Yeah, when she locks you out of the house. Can you imagine the domestics over anime opinions that are going to happen? Like, all your clothes are on the ground outside because you said the wrong thing about Shirobako.
She wouldn't say the wrong thing about Shirobako.
I think we agree on almost all the important anime opinions, so it shouldn't be much of an issue.
Okay.
Except, I'm gonna get thrown out over calling whoever homophobe the Arya's mangaka, because she is.
Yeah, but probably.
Anyway, we are here talking about the manga Inside Mari. Shout out to these three who I think cram read it like in the last 2 days.
I read everything except the first one.
Yeah, it took me 2 days.
Yeah, I read it in like a straight 3-hour chunk because it was riveting.
Yeah, it's really easy to read as well. So
it reads real quick.
Yeah.
It was an inspired choice, Anna. Well done. So let's hop in. Inside Mari is a body swapping manga written by the dude who wrote Aku no Hana and other stuff.
I think those are the main two.
Yeah, other stuff.
Yeah, your nerds might be able to do this better than I'm doing it, because like that's all I know. He wrote Aku no Hana. But yeah, I think this guy is pretty well known for uncomfortable teen drama kind of stuff.
Yeah, stuff dealing with sort of sexuality and
anxiety,
feelings of perverseness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just start with a rough kind of plot breakdown. Because, like, obviously, Mad Max, the last thing we did was just like an hour 30 movie. It's kind of easy to just condense the whole plot into discussion. Where Inside Mari, being a much longer work, kind of has a few different stages of the story. I think the first stage is I don't even remember the names. Isao?
Isao, yeah.
Thank you. The main character initially swapping bodies with Mari and then coming to terms with their new life as a girl.
Yeah.
It's really hard to... It's really... Honestly, I struggle negotiating the pronouns in this series. For, I think, very valid reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially considering I don't think it was written with pronouns in mind.
I mean, it's in Japanese. It was written in Japanese.
I mean, yeah.
You just don't have pronouns.
Not even that. Not even from that. From the author's note, this is not someone who kind of... I get the impression this is not someone who believes that pronouns are something that can be fluid. Like, yeah, but we'll get to that.
Okay. I'm interested to see this take.
And then eventually Mari kind of gets used to the body, and it moves more towards a drama. In the middle act, it's mostly an interpersonal drama between
Yori and Isao / Mari.
Yeah. Going from a very uncomfortable, tense relationship into a budding romance.
Yeah.
And eventually the manga ends with the whole kind of Tyler Durden-esque. Oh, spoilers, by the way, obviously. The very Tyler Durden-esque reveal that Isao is simply just like some kind of memory imprint created by Mari's splintered psyche. Which, I mean, heck, I imagine we're going to talk about the ending. But we shouldn't.
Should we start with the ending?
Maybe.
I think it might be
That wouldn't
good.
be a bad idea.
Because I think
Yeah,
this is
that
really,
actually isn't a bad idea.
yeah. Am I the only person here that likes it?
I was not a
I don't.
fan of many
my
elements
feelings are
of
mixed.
it.
They're not like purely negative. How I feel
Okay.
about it.
Because like
I think to me the ending was purely functional. It was a functional way of wrapping up the story in a kind of
it changes what the story stands for in a really dramatic way.
I honestly don't believe it does at all. I think
it
complete
really,
opposite.
really does. Because in rereading it, I actually viewed the entire manga in a completely different way,
Right.
just based off the ending.
I
Because
don't dislike the ending for sort of its gendered implications nearly so much as I do for the romantic.
And yeah, you like UFO. Okay.
Direction. It goes, hey, UFO is gay. UFO is gay. It's canon now. Get out of here. It's canon gay. She doesn't get dated. It's lies. It's wrong. Okay, you can't hold this over me anymore. No longer, Zaria.
Inside
No
Naughty-
longer will I be mocked for liking this very gay, not straight series. And Inside Mari, unlike Hibike Euphonium, does become dissatisfyingly straight.
Oh,
I do not
okay.
think so.
Okay, I don't
well,
agree.
really don't think so, actually.
I don't
'Cause this is
agree.
like-
It is open-ended, but like when Isao leaves Mari, the first line she says is, "Hey Yori, will you be my friend?"
Well, that's what Isao says to Yori the first time too, like early on too. It's not like that necessarily means there's nothing romantic there, and it's also assuming that Isao, like the Isao that Mari created, identifies as male, which I think is a big assumption.
That is like the.
Oh wait,
the
no,
thing,
I don't think
thing,
I don't think that. I just think that
Well, then how does it get straight?
Identifies. I mean,
it
identifies
gets straight
it's
because
a
Isao
very,
leaves Mari. Isao, who is like at least identifying as somewhere in between male and
again.
female.
I
Isn't
don't
after
think
that-
the word identify
Isn't
is-
Isao? Sorry.
I think Yori always perceives Isao Mari as a girl.
Yori is all no. Yeah, Yori is always gay for Mari Isao, whatever's going on, she's gay for it. I am not at all convinced that Mari herself, sans Isao, is gay, or at the very least,
We don't.
it gives you an
we can't tell.
it gives
We
you
can't tell
enough
because the story
implication at that
ends.
ending
Yeah.
that it's not going to be the case.
I
I
strongly
think
disagree.
Yeah, absolutely same.
I mean, first of all, look at that early
way
scene
I-
where she hugged Yori in the hospital in the nurse's
Yeah, she
room.
was definitely interested there, but I feel like it's like implying some moving on thing, some class essay.
That's
stuff.
a lot of. That's a big assumption.
It is a leap. It is a leap. To
Yeah,
be
I-
honest,
There is
we
more
don't
implication
spend
in
anywhere
that
near-
direction than there is in a romantic one.
I don't think so, actually, because I
yeah, I
Isao
disagree.
basically, in the end, Isao basically is Mari, right? Isao is basically what Mari cannot, like the Isao towards the end, especially, is basically what Mari cannot repress any longer. Like through Isao, there's so much coming out that Mari has repressed for
the
so
line's
long,
definitely
and the
good
queerness
word,
is a
that's
big part of
fair.
that, I think. Right, what you say?
You could definitely read the whole.
I read.
I think there is definitely a reading of like part of the reason that this like splinter of her mind was male is to contextualize her
No,
homosexuality.
that, and
That's
also
a
like,
reading.
I read the disappearance of Isao and like Fumiko as her accepting those parts of her into herself, and that's why they say they'll always be with her, like watching over her, because she accepts those aspects of herself into her. So I don't think it's really a rejection of her sexuality. It's actually like an acceptance of it that she doesn't have to like
exactly.
masquerade as male.
I feel like
Yeah.
for how explicit the romantic interest was at points throughout the manga, the extreme subtlety / non-existence with which those implications are there at the very end is deeply dissatisfying.
But isn't
I
that
feel
kind
like-
of isn't that kind of the point? because Isao is gone. Isao is gone at the end. This is a different Mari, and this different Mari is gonna be more distant at the start. That's just how it works.
I think a lot of this is pretty much moot because we never get to
we're
meet Mari.
We're arguing that
Mari
like
is.
the non-Isao Mari, like in the infirmary, was very into Yori. When like Isao was fading away and Isao was just becoming an expression of Mari's feelings.
There's not enough Mari for us in the story at all.
If you're
for us
arguing
to
that
really make a reading.
Mari
there's so
is
many-
clearly
there's so-
gay because Isao was Mari, then you can't argue that like the base state of Mari now without Isao is like has to build up to that point.
I think
It's not that she has to build up to
the other
being
thing
gay.
is,
It's just that she has to build up to being in a relationship with Yori again. Because she's accepted a part of herself, but she's still not the same person as Isao Mari.
Exactly.
Even if Isao Mari was a
Here's the
part
thing.
of her. So she still has to like build up that relationship again, even if she's accepted her sexuality.
Here's the thing, though. If we're taking Isao to be a representation of homosexuality, then we also have to take him to be a representation of maleness. Yeah, I don't think you can take one without the other. There's a part of Mari's brain that she considers male.
I don't think that's the case.
I'm not sure.
I don't know how you can separate that from the homosexuality.
I think that's-
if
I think that
if it's
part
a
of-
cipher for the homosexuality, it's a cipher for gender too. They go hand in hand.
I think that part of her brain that you're talking about is just a thought that goes into heteronormativity.
I mean, Isao is so male coded. Like
Yes.
like
and when he-
painstakingly
that's why he
male-coded.
disappears. And that's why he disappears, because she stopped buying. She stops buying into heteronormativity and instead accepts her own sexuality.
If you hadn't caught on by now, loyal audience, this is very complicated and tough to sort out.
It is. I mean, it's really interesting to me hearing this because I think the romance was maybe the least interesting part of
think-
this story to me.
It is
So,
really important.
none of these questions really went through my mind at all. I was reading this story as a trans story, not a lesbian story. And the ending didn't change that for me. What the ending did is it completely Deus Ex Machina'd, and it was all a dream, the transness of the story for me. And I think we can get into that. I don't want to take too far away from this lesbian discussion. But yeah, no, I feel like my reading of this story as a whole is very different from the three of you because it seems like it's rooted more in romance for the three of you guys.
I
than
wouldn't
anything else.
necessarily.
No, this is.
I mean,
just,
okay,
like,
to me
on
that's
the
probably true.
subject.
To me, that's
my
probably
thoughts
true.
on the ending are more rooted in the romance. It's more even for like the manga as a whole.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
I think the manga still makes a lot of points about transgender stuff.
Oh yeah.
There's like there's a lot about gender to be. I mean, I guess queer stuff inherently has gender in it, and gender will inherently be there and be a topic, and especially if we talk
I
about
think-
gender stories.
Yeah.
So
For me, the whole way I see this story is completely informed by that first author's note. Which, okay, this is my reading of that author's note. The author basically describes textbook dysphoria, gender dysphoria. He also
Where? What chapter? Do you remember what chapter?
at the end of the
Chapter
first volume.
8,
Did you
I
read
think.
my? If you, I can link you to my piece on Medium because it literally has all of it. Just
I'm not
copy
sure
and
if I
paste
remember
it.
that. I'll go check it out. I have it right here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hang on 1 second. Lachlan, I'll get it to you. If you just go scroll down, it's four pages, and I've got all of them on there.
Cool. Thanks.
So yeah, so the author himself basically describes dysphoria pretty much exactly in line with how I feel it myself, and then goes on to basically just spew a pretty typical internalized transphobia,
Yeah.
like the idea that the lines between genders can never be crossed, and he's just resigned to a life of looking wistfully from his side of the fence. And that to me completely informs everything, because this is to me a story about a story that a dysphoric person tells who just doesn't have the tools to really come to terms with his own dysphoria and maybe even his own sexuality. And I feel like there's a lot of confusion in this story as a result, just inherently. And I think that comes across in lots of ways. I think the ending is part of it, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't. Maybe this wasn't on the thing I read or whatever.
It was on Crunchyroll. If you read it on Crunchyroll, it was on Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
Someone, you know what is worse though? This means you didn't read my piece. How?
No, I did read your piece. That's why I thought I knew it. I just didn't remember it from having read the manga.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, he directly references sex change.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just see a lot of confusion in this entire story. And it's very sad. It was very difficult for me reading this, especially after the author's note, because I just wanted to go and sit down with this author and just be like, here's some literature. It's okay to feel like this. If you need someone to talk to, here's a bunch of people you can talk to.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
there's so much more to life than it seems like you're aware of. And obviously, I think Japan is maybe not the best place for trans people to live.
It seems like the sort of the fulcrum of his misconception here rests with this psychological essentialism, this gendered psychological essentialism, where the mind of a girl is this real concrete thing and definitively separated from the mind of a man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I feel like in a lot of ways that I'm not sure if that's really the case in Inside Mari itself. Is it?
No, exactly.
No.
So one of the scenes,
I'm not
if
sure.
if I want to stop talking about romance, and talk about sort of my gendered impressions of Inside Mari, is at the start, Isao Mari is very hot and bothered, very aroused by just seeing girls change,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
seeing themselves in underwear and the such. But relatively soon into the series, the scene where they first see their breasts naked for the first time, there's sort of no lustful or sexual or flustered reaction. It's a very just deadpan sort of reaction to that. And that
I think
struck for me the big shift where they just saw female bodies as normalized, and it didn't become this super inherently sexual flustering thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree. I think Isao at the very start is just really coded male
Mm-hmm.
for the first bit, and that's the part that
Painfully
really
so.
that really stuck. I think at least with me, and I know with Brooke as well, as really dysphoric and really hard to read at points. Honestly,
Yeah.
because it does hit quite home.
Mm-hmm.
Close to home. And then
I'm literally thinking
changes.
of 3 or 4 different things.
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm thinking of 3 or 4 different things early on, that. Yeah, that really was just this is just too me. This is too personal.
Yeah.
I am struggling.
Yeah, and then that changes slowly but surely. Isao isn't really coded male anymore. It's not really.
Yeah.
And this is why we're saying you can't really pronouns are really hard here
Mm-hmm.
because I think
You could even argue for a they plural.
Yeah.
you could really
And even
Yeah.
the whole way they experience attraction sort of mirrors how it works for many trans girls like myself, where it
Mhm.
becomes
No,
way
totally.
more emotionally intimacy based as opposed to just being that more basic physical arousal.
100%.
And here's
I want to
here is why.
tell this mangaka no, you don't have to be the mind of a man. You don't have to be lustful. Hormones kill your
Yeah.
boners, guy. Don't worry, it's fine. You don't have to be a lustful man.
That's how
in
I read
a
it.
woman's body.
That is honestly, how I read it and why the ending was actually really disappointing for me is because I thought that like existing inside a female body was changing Isao. I was, they would be in a body where estrogen was pumping through their bloodstream, and that we know scientifically has changes on people's sexuality, personality, lots of stuff. And I thought that is what was contextualizing all of the changes, because very clearly the Isao we meet at the beginning of the manga is very different from the one halfway through the manga.
No, totally.
And I think the clarification there really is the scene where the self-masturbation scene.
Yeah.
Where like you have Isao and Mari looking at, Isao Prime and just being like they don't recognize themselves
Rookie cut out
anymore. And shit, I thought that was going to be a really profound kind of trans metaphor for a second there. And it ended up being not.
Oh, Discord,
So
why
that is
are
kind
you
of the
doing this
reason
to
why
me? Discord,
I was
why
a
you
little
crash?
disappointed. I do definitely see if you read
Discord.
this story more as a gendered lesbian thing, that the ending can have different readings, which might fit better. But yeah, for me, it kind of just I feel like it undid everything in a way that made me just want to completely disregard the ending and focus on the actual journey itself. That was a really good point to kind of just sort these issues out, Lachlan, by the way. I'm actually going to mark down the time of that on my thing. That's about 22 minutes in. Lachlan, I might as well type. Is it everyone else is still fine, right? Oh God. Oh, hello?
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, you're back.
can hear
okay,
Anna.
yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so did anyone
Okay.
stop their recording?
No.
No.
Cool. So we can just
Okay,
do
so
a
we're all
resync
going?
test here to make sure we're all
Yeah,
lined
we
up
might.
again.
I think it's not a bad idea to do a resync. So that was 22 to 24 minutes on my recording.
Yeah, just under 24 for me.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
when it started, but like it was.
It'll be 24 by the time we finish the sync. But yeah, in my recording, I think as long as we're synced on both ends, the only time you'd only need one of our times. Okay, so syncing in 3, 2, 1.
Bacon.
And for the editor, I finished my point really succinctly on my own. I don't know if maybe I feel like there's probably a lot of weird talking over each other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Did you guys hear what I was saying
I did.
about
You
how?
cut out like
No.
right before you got to the point of what you were saying. It was
Yeah.
tragic. I was like, no, I want to hear this interesting, good book stuff.
Okay, so just to I'll try and just reiterate exactly what I said, and then you guys can react to it, and we can just like cut them together, basically.
Yeah.
So I was saying how like, did you hear me talking about how I saw the story as like Isao being in a female body? He would have estrogen going through his body.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
change everything. And then like there was the moment where the self-masturbation scene where Isao is looking at themselves and doesn't recognize themselves anymore.
Yeah. So
Did-
for me, you like mentioned masturbation, and then it died.
Okay. Yeah, so from there it's like that was kind of it. So it goes like there's a point halfway through the manga where Isao like in Mari like masturbates Isao Prime, and there's just a moment there where they do not connect. Like the Isao and Mari does not recognize themselves in Isao Prime anymore. They're very clearly two different people now. And that just all feeds into my reading of the story as it was just a trans metaphor to me the whole way through. It was a trans story. It was the idea of someone who was born assigned male at birth, ending up with a female body and a female mind and adapting into it as more comfortable than their original body. And in a way, being inside Mari seemed like it was healing Isayao to several degrees, really, I thought.
Yeah.
And so when I got to the ending, and it was it basically the ending for my reading just completely nullifies the whole thing. Like, it completely just Deus Ex Machinas, and it was all a dreams, the whole transness of the story. There's definitely gendered things to talk about. There's definitely queer and lesbian things to talk about, and we have done. But, like, my personal reading of the story just got completely thrown in the bin, which is why it was personally so disappointing.
Yeah.
And then go from here.
It is sort of the story of Mari, and Isao is not as much an entity unto themselves as they are an
I kind of see it like
of Mari.
As Isao adapts more to their body and becomes more aligned with being female and being,
they just sort of become one with Mari.
They become a lot more like Mari, and that's why eventually they're no longer necessary, because the amount of divergence between them has become so low that Mari's able to accept Isao as a part of her. So I don't necessarily think it really like invalidates the trans stuff. It's definitely like less.
It kind of does, because it starts off being a story about a man in a woman's body, and ends up being it was a woman in a woman's body the whole time.
I would be interested to know if like that twist was planned from the start, like if as they were writing it, the mangaka always.
I don't know about that, honestly.
I'm pretty sure it is, actually. Because,
it felt like
especially rereading it.
I feel like that would be the case, and because just like reading through it, the sort of the way the story went at the end there felt reasonable and felt like it was something that had been getting built towards. So I don't think it's wrong to like read it through a trans lens, because it certainly lends itself to that. But I do think it does sort of indicate things enough so that it isn't like an outright betrayal in doing that.
Yeah. Well, it was never. I don't think it was. I think it was the transness of the story.
It's about this character Mari and using her psychological.
I think the way I ended up
as a means of exploring the author's own experiences with gender dysphoria.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly how I see it. I feel like any transness that I read are completely unintentional, just by the process of this being a story written by a dysphoric person trying to come to terms with their own dysphoria. And it's like it's pretty obvious to me that it was never meant to be read as a trans story, and I feel like that is kind of why the ending just ends up falling short for me, because it was never meant to satisfy what I was looking for, which, I mean, it's not. I don't hold it against the author at all, but it was just kind of disappointing for me personally.
I can see that. I do think, though, that there's like still a lot of trans relevant stuff to talk about. Especially talking about how I'm not sure if I would, like you mentioned, how it ended up being a woman in a woman's body. Not even sure if I'd say this that was the case.
See, we might, but I think the author would. See, that's the thing. I feel like it's hard for me to really. The author is not writing this story with the same concepts of gender and gender fluidity that we are.
I mean, that may be, but just like not just completely ignoring the author's intent here. What the manga does in the end is it has this male coded personality and a female coded body, and the male coded personality drifts more and more towards being first androgynous and then towards a more feminine manner, I guess. And
but that is that is re-cissifying for a weird made-up term. She is becoming back towards cisgendered. Which, I mean, yeah, she is. You know.
I mean,
if you look at that as the
is.
eventual healing,
I wouldn't
of the arc,
I wouldn't say it's recessifying, because it's never really a trans person, is it? It's never. It's really hard.
I mean, it's a woman which has a man living inside her brain. It's not real. It's not real science. You know, we can't look at this from a true psychological perspective, because I'm pretty sure. I think split personality is very contested, borderline completely debunked. I was reading some stuff about it recently. I'm certainly not an expert, but it's definitely like it's by no means scientifically concrete.
I think like the sort of pop media understanding of it definitely doesn't line up with things, but I'm pretty sure. Is it DID? Is it something identity disorder?
Yeah, dissociative
identity disorder. Like I'm pretty confident that is like actually a thing. It's just not.
It is. I just feel like again,
this
I'm
plays
not make
very
any
fast
statements
with it for sure.
Sure, yeah. I think DID leads people to believe they are suffering from multiple personality disorder. I think that is the text that basically I was reading. I think it was like around when Split came out, the film with James McAvoy. There was a lot of this discussion.
Right.
And how it was like cases of multiple personality disorder just went up through the roof in like the 80s, I think, in I believe white women. Pretty much like 95% or something like really high were like so and now, you know, we associate that to DID. But yeah, like multiple personality disorder in itself is gone out of vogue, I believe. Again, I'm not quoting or sourcing anything here. This is like months old information rattling around my brain. If I'm I would urge people to do their own reading and not listen to me in the slightest. But either way, it's like, I don't know. It goes from being a man living in a woman's brain to being a woman retaking her brain in a weird way, or not retaking but healing and rejoining those parts into a single, definitely female mind, right? And becoming cisgendered again.
I mean, the thing is, I think we have to ask I think it depends on how you read Isao Mari's gender identity in the first place, because I think because the version of Isao that exists in Mari's mind feels so much like a dysphoric person. I mean, I don't know if it's like really fair to call them trans either, because they do exist in a female body. It's not like they're like technically they believe themselves to be assigned male at birth.
This is exactly the confusion I was talking about before.
They're in an AFAB body, not an AMAB body, and it's
the author has pretty clearly stated their beliefs on the separation of the male mind and female mind. And I feel like the confusion we're seeing around the edges is entirely our interpretation. I feel like the author's intent is pretty clear. Like we can discuss our own interpretations, and like myself, like the trans interpretation to me is what I took away, even if it wasn't intended. It's how I take this story. Even with the ending, I just completely disregard the ending. I don't think it takes away from the way I read the story at all. And I know it wasn't how the author wrote it, but it still mattered to me. And I feel like we're kind of doing the same thing to a degree. Sadly, the author does not share our more fluid understanding of gender.
I'd love for them to show up to a con I'm heading to, so I could ask them some questions.
Oh god, but can you imagine if you inadvertently cracked an egg at like a convention?
That'd be fucking wild.
Oh no. All I personally would do is just slip some like leaflets into their coat or something. It's like, please love yourself, look after yourself, and read these informations. Like, find your own path. I'm a big believer in people like finding their own path.
I'd like quote his passage from that author note about like not wanting to be a male mind in a female body, and like, hey, like I'm a trans girl, like, did you know that like hormones kind of affect your mind, and calling it a male mind at that stage, it's sort of off, and like the lust you're worried about isn't actually a problem because you don't get boners on these pills. Like, what do you just? Hey, can I offer you some pills, my friend?
Hey, speak for yourself. Speak for yourself though on the boner part. So I feel like if we only have 50 minutes in, I feel like we could go around on that a lot. I think maybe picking something else to discuss might be a really good thing.
I have a topic.
Hit us.
Okay, cool. I have one that I really want to talk about as well, but I feel like I've been talking a lot lately, so you go first.
Objectification in Inside Mari.
That's a good one.
Because that's one of the big topics that is really important in Inside Mari. It's the objectification of the female body, and also just people in general. It's really obvious at the start of the manga when people are like, when Isao realized that people are constantly looking at Mari, or like, etc. But it's also even more apparent and even more important. It is in the way that both Isao and Yori see Mari as this really holy person, and this incredibly like pure and whatnot person. That shell kind of cracking, and Mari kind of finding herself as this imperfect human being, and that kind of thing is one of the biggest things that I took away from the manga.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because like one of the big sort of struggles from Mari, in like an overall character sense, is the sort of standards she's held to and the image that she's built, and living up to that, and being bound by those confines and not necessarily being able to express herself fully within those.
Yeah.
So the fact that Yori and Isao are both people who very much buy into and reinforce that narrow identity she's created, they're part of that problem that's really constraining her, and that in many ways the whole sort of thing going on in this manga is her trying to deal with.
Yeah. I feel like it's an amazing point, and objectification is not just physical. Like, you can objectify a female body, but you can also objectify a female's mind. I mean, like, idolizing is to me like another word for objectifying. Almost.
And speaking of idols, there's this one scene in karaoke where Mari, or Isao in Mari's body, sings AKB48's Heavy Rotation, which is an incredibly infamous song for how sexual its video is. And this is something that like I keep mentioning these articles to literally everyone. It's an article by Nanayara Cosmos. We're gonna link it somewhere. This like
I'll make sure to get that linked.
Yeah, they point this out in the article, and like it's for once it's the what's the word? It's the linking to the idea of idols and idolization of a person, and at the same time it's also the sexualization that's as well through through Heavy Rotation. It's a really cool thing. I think that's a really cool thing.
It wasn't something I picked up on. I was not aware. I think I'd heard of Heavy Rotation. I wasn't aware of the context until I read through. I did skim through the article. I haven't fully read it, but I think that is a very deliberate choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
It absolutely has to be, and I mean, that stuff just like in general that I have a lot of opinions on, like idol industry being maybe 10% of that, just like this, like putting women on pedestals,
Yeah,
pussy on a pedestal.
It's very real. I mean, and it's as I said, it's one of the big things about Inside Mari that I found to be really important, and I also think that it really buys into the idea of Inside Mari as a queer piece of like Because
Well, I mean, to be perfectly frank, yeah, these are the kind of insights that you kind of would almost expect from a trans woman. To be perfectly honest, if it feels like this is not read by written by a typical male author, there's probably a reason for that.
yeah, that might be, yeah. I mean, like, just to finish that point really quick, I think it really fits into this idea of Zen Mari as a queer piece that we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, like the very beginning of the book club, anyway. Because it's the idea of like breaking out of this shell that she's created for herself. And Isao is a construct of herself that she creates because she wants to get away from this idolization, from this picture of the perfect Mari. And within that confined is her idea of her own sexuality, running away from herself being gay. And so she creates Isao as a male construct, this really dirty almost person. That's
kind of what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that for once is like completely different from who she pretends to be, in front of literally everyone, and at the same time is also male, negating her and her conforming into heteronormativity and her sexual attraction towards girls.
Yeah. I mean that makes total sense. I think the queer reading is very legitimate.
Aku no Hana as well, you've got this sort of idolized female figure, which is the girl our main character has a crush on, and this sort of dirty, perverse maleness embodied by that character in his idolization of her. There's definitely sort of a I think palpable resentment of masculinity or elements of masculinity,
also known as
in just this mangaka's works generally.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like that, like resentment, that self, like shame and like almost like self-disgust is pretty much exactly how I experienced dysphoria, and I feel like, God, in just so many ways. Like honestly, like I can think of several. I think the masturbation is obviously a huge deal in this manga. It's very much tying male sexuality to and male desire to just shame and dirtiness in a way. I mean, we've got 4 trans feminine people in this podcast room. I would love to hear if you guys share my experiences on this matter, but like that was something I struggled with a lot. Especially like the male gaze, right? I personally, I used to really try and avoid ever staring at women, because taking a glance.
You're right. Like, I was extremely conscious of my gaze in a manner that like probably isn't typical of like a cis guy. And I never thought about my gaze specifically until just now, but that was something I was like extremely conscious of.
Yeah. And like if I ever made like eye contact, or if I ever like did, glance at a lady's figure or something like that, and I thought that they might have twigged, I used to feel absolutely awful. I used to hate that so much. So the whole concept of like male gaze being this just like really low, like unpleasant, unwanted thing is like a really self-conscious insecurity in the author. I feel like I feel like the author is very conscious of his own gaze and is very insecure about it in the same way that I was, and maybe you were as well, Lachlan.
Yeah.
No, me too.
Yeah,
I feel like it's pretty, maybe not universal, but common at least.
Yeah. Honestly, I would actually really like to hear a cis lesbian's take on that. You know, I feel like obviously the expectations are very different from a woman,
Right.
like, or someone who passes as a woman, and was raised as a woman from us who are assigned differently. Yeah, I mean, like we do all share very similar experiences, so it's kind of hard for us to see the more cisgendered perspective. But yeah, that the male gaze and the masturbation were two really big touching points for my own dysphoria. And there's a lot of stuff in the editor's note as well, like the like half the world being girls is pretty much word for word exactly how I used to think before I was able to recognize my dysphoria for being dysphoria. Yeah. It was really difficult for me to read a story that I felt like I could have written when I was like, in a very dark place.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, did you guys feel like when you were reading the story like it was touching onto your own dysphoria?
Oh, yeah,
I don't.
No, it did. Although, like, I think probably to a greater extent than you, the queer stuff also kind of touched on my dysphoria. Because, like, at least for me, my dysphoria was definitely very tied up in my sexuality as well.
Less so for me, so that's really interesting. Yeah.
So that's
Please
so
talk
like
about that.
kind of throughout the manga, the way Isao Mari like perceives girls, especially as they come to see themselves as a girl more and more, is really interesting to me because in some ways it kind of mirrors my own path, and like the way my sexuality has changed over time, like the last few years, as I've like realized more about myself and started HRT and stuff. So that was definitely a part of it that I feel like I could fairly easily connect to.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I don't really have this experience with the manga. Because my dysphoria has never really been that much of a mental thing in a lot of ways, I think. So I'm not sure if mental here is the right word, but
No, that it could be.
Because like for me, the manga was I never really felt much of myself, so much of myself in the manga. To be honest, I didn't see my dysphoria in it. For me, it was more about the identity part of the manga. How the identity changes over time and like the fluidity of the identity was something that was closer to me personally. It's a bit hard to explain. I'm not sure if I'm...
I think I get it. I do think I get it. I mean, here's a question, which I think might contextualize a lot of this. Do you think you've ever really seen yourself as male?
Me?
Yeah.
I might not have. I'm not sure.
I think I definitely have.
I definitely have as well. And I think that might be the difference, is that you maybe have less baggage tied up to this anchor of masculinity.
It might be.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure about any of this. Like my personal identity is a mess, so
It's true, yeah. I mean, I think I think it definitely the four of our paths. I feel like me, Lachlan, and Zario, once that light flashed, if there was no going back,
Yeah.
Where I feel like you have definitely been more somewhere towards the middle.
Yeah, I tend to describe myself not necessarily as a trans girl, but more like as a non-binary femme person. So, like, I don't like. I find it hard to really pinpoint my identity, and maybe that kind of shows in how I sit inside Mari as well.
I mean, exactly. I think your reading being different and your kind of self-identity being different, that should be very validating. Because I feel like the three of us, like, very, just very... I mean, like, once I realized I was trans, I kind of feel like there wasn't a whole lot of doubt after that point. I mean, there was doubt. It's like, am I am I fucking up my life? That kind of doubt, but never really like, am I non-binary? There was never really that doubt for me.
Yeah, that's a concept.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, actually. And again, super valuable. I feel like even if this work was never intended to be, a trans work, I mean, look at how all four of us have related to it in our own ways and our own different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely in like a more overall sense. Inside Mari was one of the more impactful sort of media experiences I think I've had, certainly in a while. It felt on sort of the
what
level
about compared
of
to Kase-san?
Ooh. I think
I can speak
a different like strain of stuff. So it feels more like the sort of experiences watching Eva and some of those other like more psychologically high-minded series I watched when I was like 14 and 15, where Inside Mari just presented me with such a density of various like very well conceived and developed feelings and ideas in this very tight and space, this very composed piece of media. And I was sort of just left like reeling, trying to process everything the experience of consuming it hit me with in a manner that I don't think I've really experienced much since those like big revelatory early teen media experiences.
Yeah, for me, it goes. Go on.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I mean, it's for me, it's like the big pieces of media that really stick out for me, that I'm probably best known for as well. It's like things like Shirobako, things like UFO, things like Yorimoy nowadays. There's other kind of things that get me really emotional, and that really stick with me because they're so emotionally. Because I was so emotionally invested with them, in them. Inside Mari is really different with that. Like it's stuck with me in that really different way. It's like every time I finish reading Inside Mari, I say every time, it was 2 times now. The 2 times I finished Inside Mari, I've just kind of sat back for like half an hour and just kept thinking about it. And I kept coming back to Inside Mari, and like it was very impactful for me in a different way than I'm used to.
Yeah, for me, it's like I definitely relate. It hit me in a way that nothing. I mean, I don't think there's been a piece of media that's really hit me on such a deep, like almost spiritual level since Life is Strange, which is, I say, probably the experience for me that have led, like, playing Life is Strange for me led to me realizing that I'm trans in a very significant way. And it's different. Finishing for me Life is Strange was a very sad and dysphoric experience because that was before I realized I was trans, before I knew what I was feeling. This is similar, but now I know the context for the feelings, and it was just it was like looking into a mirror in a lot of ways, and that can always be difficult.
No, I guess a big part of it for Inside Mari is the fact that it's just like a very strong representation of dysphoria from a very talented artist, and we just have relatively little media like even portraying dysphoria itself. And so seeing what is such an intense and sort of integral feeling and experience
absolutely right,
represented for one of the first times, and thus in a manner that feels very fresh and unique to what's come before, it's just gonna hit. Like, there's
even Wandering Sun.
I was
didn't get it. That's right, because it was written by a cis person.
That was what I was gonna say. It's
an educated cis person and an uneducated dysphoric person tells very different stories.
Exactly.
And by educated, I mean on gender issues, like Western concepts of gender. Not.
Like there's tons of media talking about frustration or joy or love, or all of those big emotions, and dysphoria is sort of on that level of those core human emotions in terms of weight for those of us who do experience it. but it's just so vastly disproportionate in terms of media that represents that as opposed to those other feelings. I mean, that's part of what makes Inside Mari feel so momentous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like explaining dysphoria is so difficult, like, because
You can't grasp it.
how do you explain it?
Yeah.
How can you possibly explain it? Either you're talking to a trans person and you don't need to explain it, or you're talking to a cis person and there's no way you can.
Yeah, if you have
so I feel like
dysphoria, you
works
don't
like
know
this
what it
is
is
so
to
important.
not
Yeah.
feel it. And if you don't have it, you have no idea what it is to feel it. It's like that very tough divide,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I in my piece, I actually said, and I believe this, I think that this is one of the most significant trans works that I've ever read.
Yeah.
Possibly more than Wandering Sun.
I mean, Wandering Sun is so mainly in a
Wandering Sun is very positive.
It's very important in a
It's very
representational.
woke.
I think
Yeah.
Wandering Sun isn't like I was like Wandering Sun to me isn't a trans work. It is a work about trans people, but it's not a trans work.
It feels very documentary-esque.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
totally.
You know, it's a story told about these transgender people. It's not necessarily a story told by transgender people,
Yeah.
and you can feel that, I think.
Yeah, Wandering Sun is sort of like an ambassador for transness and the trans experiences.
Yeah.
And Inside Mari is like a very intimate exploration of them.
Which actually, I think it's an interesting comparison if you look at. This will be quick since it's a bit off topic, but Wandering Sun versus Aoihana. Aoihana feels like a lot more like it's about Shimura's lived experiences than Wandering Sun, which is a lot more documentary-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we're referring to... apologies if any listeners aren't familiar with Wandering Sun. We will almost certainly get around to it at some point. It is probably the seminal work, transgender piece of work from Japan. Like full stop, maybe? Not even anime or manga, just full stop.
Pretty sure full stop. Pretty sure it's just full stop. At least in the West.
Yeah, so highly recommend it, manga or anime. But yeah, we will eventually get around to talking about it. It's just kind of like our trans audience should probably be familiar.
Anyone listening to this will at least know of it.
Yeah, I think let's talk about something a little bit just more technical to end up. I just want to take a second to appreciate the art and some of the pages that really stood out to me.
Can we talk about the paneling?
Yes.
The paneling, the double panels are incredible. It's double page panels, I mean. The period scene, in particular.
Exactly.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it was, and then the entire part afterwards. The manga is really good at creating like a specific, really uncomfortable atmosphere, and I'm guessing this comes like a lot from experience with stuff like Akunohana. Because Akunohana is really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
so deeply uncomfortable that I could not finish watching it because wow, baby, that is. A very intensely intimate emotional experience if you have social anxiety.
Yeah, I remember watching like some of Akunohana and having to pause like every minute because I couldn't keep watching.
Yeah, that was Inside Mari for like the first 2 volumes for me. I literally had to keep putting it down because it was so draining. I just didn't have the stamina.
Yeah, and that's what
I had to like build. Yeah,
and that's what the mangaka is really good at. Like that is something that the mangaka is. Like it's not just gorgeous art, but in terms of its paneling, it's really, really good at creating this really uncomfortable. And I'm a big fan of that.
Like putting my my cisgendered hat on and viewing this as like completely devoid of all the queer and trans issues. I still think this is an incredible piece of work on its own, just on its own merit.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, art, story, just everything. Like. I mean, just judging it on those terms, I don't think it's like, just perfect or like just really incredible. I would put it like probably a 9 out of 10 range in just its technical skills. But yeah, it really is. It's so funny that it's like such a competent an amazingly told story, and yet we've barely even scratched that surface just because of how personal it was for all of us.
It's probably the more like
You know?
relevant stuff to discuss, but yeah, there is a lot
Yeah.
to dig
Yeah.
into with Inside Mari.
Yeah, I mean, you could break it down from like a, from like a review perspective in a completely different way than we just spent 50 minutes talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
You know? But I don't give a shit about that stuff. So.
I mean, I don't think you're gonna get like people talking about
Certified
Inside Mari the way
Frosty.
we did, like very, very often, right? Like, I think this is like
This
I mean,
is
the
the
big reason why-
definitive discussion on Inside Mari.
exactly. No, the reason
You won't get this kind of transness anywhere else.
no, this is like the main,
100%
this is like,
distilled trans.
this is like the exact reason why I thought it would be really cool to talk about it, because Inside Mari is a really fascinating work, and like seeing it from our perspective, like giving our perspectives on it is, I think it made for a really, very interesting topic.
I'm
Yeah,
going to
we're
say
extremely
that it's going to
fantastic
be-
and interesting.
Yeah.
Just immensely talented podcast host. The audience
Beautiful.
is pretty blessed to have us here, I think.
Yeah,
I'm honored just to exist as myself, really.
I am honored to be in my own presence. Yeah, like similarly. I'm going to go on the limb and say this is probably the most.
Probably the best podcast
Significant-
of all time. Just kind of.
No, this is probably the most significant work we will do in Book Club for a very long time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think we'll wrap it up there because we've gone a little long and we need to talk about next month's reading. So next month for the Book Club, we will be looking at a short anime series called Time of Eve. I know absolutely nothing about this. It was something that the other guys kind of pitched and decided on.
Something that
And
it's something that I decided on again. Actually,
Yeah, Anna, you're taking a cool down after this.
I'm just the book club person at this point, right?
Yeah, when it comes like to like 2-3 weeks from now, and you're saying Gatchman Krause, I'm gonna bop you on the head with a roll of newspaper, saying no, too much Anna.
All right.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, goodness, it's not even a full 12 like episode series, right?
No,
It's
it's
like,
just
it's
a
basically the
OVA,
same one.
ONA.
It's just about
Sure.
It's about as long as a movie. It's
It's an hour 46 minutes. Everything
Yeah.
all put together there. So an easy watch to get through. It's
very
on
easy
Crunchyroll.
watch.
It's from director Yasuhiro Yoshiura, who's this very
really good.
interesting, fairly distinctive director. He's mostly done various short films. His one like feature-length film is called Patama Inverted,
It's not good.
which is a world where I've heard it's not great. That's the only other thing of his I
Yeah,
haven't
it's
seen.
okay. Only okay.
It's a world where like there's people who have normal gravity and then people who like gravity works in reverse, so they gotta like live underground to not fly up into the air. It's supposed to be like a
That's
generic
dumb.
action rom.
It is dumb.
It's basically like producers saw that he's a cool director and like hooked him up with like a bigger like mainstream like go do this general
Sure,
audience
sure.
film,
Yeah.
and that's just not his deal.
Completely on a tangent. There was an episode of, I want to say the show's called Roly Poly Oly.
Yeah, he's roly poly oly.
Yeah. I'm so glad someone else has heard of this. I think it was on like the budget TV station in
Roly
the UK.
poly oly is so good. That was my childhood. I love it. I own the movies.
There was
It's
one
good.
episode. There was one episode where they fucked something up and the gravity of the world got inverted, and the dad almost got shot into space and had to get like held onto.
We're rewatching
and pulled back
all
into
of
the
Roly
house.
Poly Oly's area. We're gonna do commentary tracks for the Roly
legit
Poly
gave
Oly
me-
films
How do we
area.
have time
that
to do
legit
that?
gave me like
At some
childhood
point.
trauma of the idea of gravity getting inverted and I would just fly into space.
Oh.
Is this what's going to take over for Comic Girls after that's done?
Roly Poly Oly.
Oh, no, we gotta
Exactly.
do-
If you want to rewatch Roly Poly Oly, I'm down with that.
We have
We could
already
do one of the
declared
book
our
movies.
next.
I love it. It's so.
Next fan fiction.
That's like one of my dearest childhood shows.
It was on the same network as Bear Bear in the Big Blue House, which is I liked more personally.
I mean, Bear in the Big Blue House is a classic. It's great.
Yeah.
But Roly Poly Oly though.
Okay.
But
well,
we're
yeah,
not-
Back to Time of Eve.
Yeah, Time of Eve. That's the one. Ethan
yeah. Well, I think we've said it's on Crunchyroll. It's
Yeah.
short. Go watch it. You've got plenty of time. You've got 4 weeks, so no excuses. And yeah, we will be back next week with another regularly scheduled Transculture Club podcast.
Thanks for putting up with our bullshit this week.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Bye. See you next time.
Bye.